key message, if there is one, to get across is that the Centre for Voluntary Sector Leadership is all about research, and by that I mean academically rigorous research, academic research, online learning and engagement across the sector. And this event is just one of many that we do to do that engagement. I've taken here, sort of paraphrased, if you like, the mission of the Open University, and that is to do research that creates social impact, the integration of research across different domains, and teaching, and as well as external engagements, and to make a difference through practice-engaged research. And to me, that very much sums up the kind of ethos and philosophy of CVSL as well. Our focus is very much on smaller voluntary organisations. That's something that we've been trying to do. But actually, as research has progressed, we've found that there's this really interesting dynamic between smaller voluntary organisations and the larger organisations within the sector. So I guess one of the reflections I'd have is that we've found it's less helpful to draw that distinction between large and small and large. And actually, there's a really interesting dialogue between different sizes and different dynamics within the sector. Indeed, I think part of our overall approach, if you like, is to kind of really help in understanding what is the voluntary sector, what makes it work, doing our best to help to advance the academic research agenda around understanding the sector in all its diversity and complexity. So it's not just about leadership, although leadership is obviously a key focus of what we do. So just briefly, you've been introduced already to a lot of the people who are part of the centre. You've met Steve, you've met Vita. So proud to see what Vita's achieved with the documentary and all the people that have taken part in that. Again, it's a fantastic example of the kind of engagement that we're trying to do. It's great that we've seen the documentary. It's the first time any of us have seen it today. We draw in lecturers from the department. You've already met Owain. It's such a shame that you can't meet Carol. She'd be really pleased to see the progress we've made and to contribute as well. We draw in other academics from across the department, indeed the faculty. We have 4 PhD students who are all making excellent progress with their work. They're mostly in their second year of their studies, and I'll say a little bit more about that. But we also draw in visiting fellows, and some of those are here today. So partly that's about engaging more widely with the sector, and they help us they take part in research, they help us to engage with different constituencies, they engage locally, they engage nationally, and again I'll talk more about the different scales that we're working at. So to sum that up, key themes really are applied research. That's what we do. Personally, that's what I'm committed to. We're interested in leadership within the voluntary sector, and we attempt to have a kind of distinctive way that we do research, and action research is a key part of that. We integrate research into our online learning, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, and we do collaboration and partnership across the sector. It's as much about openness, dialogue, consultation as we can possibly make it, acknowledging all the kind of restrictions we have of being within a university, and obviously having kind of academic sort of incentive structures as well to compete with. So, I guess these are our watchwords: academically rigorous research that is engaged and makes a difference. So, just to give you a little flavour of some of the projects that we've been involved with, and forgive me, I could probably talk for days about the research, so I won't. But just I wanted to give you a little snapshot of some of the things that we've been doing. These projects are all in different stages, and obviously they help us to build capacity within the centre, but also to do that kind of research that, as I mentioned, is all about understanding the sector in the deeper sense, as well as understanding leadership and making progress in the way we research leadership. So we're doing work for the Lloyds Bank Foundation, which we'll be reporting on in the next couple of months. And it's all about understanding the value and contribution of small and medium charities to society. Social value creation is a key part of that. And again, the ideas around social value and public value draw on all sorts of strengths within the department that we're in. And again, just watch this space. The Lloyds Bank Foundation will be making, I think, quite a big noise about the research when it comes out in the next few months. We're engaged in quite a long-term project which focuses on mental health crisis support, what role the voluntary sector has in that, and that's all about collaboration and working across sector boundaries, because the voluntary sector is very much engaged often in commissioning relationships with the public sector, and it's also about challenging the way things that are happening in the public sector as well. And it's also about innovation and system leadership, whether the voluntary sector can really step up and provide new services and challenge challenge systems as well. We're engaged in an Erasmus Plus project, which has got a European-wide focus. It's all about entrepreneurial leadership. So again, it takes us in a slightly different direction, looking at entrepreneurial leadership, what that means, pinning down a set of competencies, and building a framework to kind of promote forms of training and leadership development across the whole of Europe. And again, this is quite a long-term project, so we're about halfway through. And finally, one of the research projects that really underpins a lot of the work within the centre and draws in quite a wide range of different academics is our focus on collective leadership. And you've seen aspects of that already through some of the existing, the earlier presentations, Owen's work on collective leadership, Carol's too, and also demonstrated in a really practical manner in the documentary. So we're doing a longitudinal piece of research focusing on voluntary sector leaders and their collaborative activities. And again, we'll be making academic outputs and a variety of different outputs. Sometimes it's almost about narrative and storytelling around some of those things as well. And Steve has been working on telling stories around some of this as well. Finally, we're doing some work with Clinks as well on the transforming rehabilitation, very much sort of policy applied research, and that is almost ready to go. You probably don't believe me when I say all these research outputs are so close to completion, but they watch this space. So I really want to mention the PhD work as well. Fantastic amount of work being done by our PhD students, and they're almost all in the room now, so please do grab them if you want to get into more detail. Christina's working on commissioning for social value, which again touches on all sorts of aspects of our other projects. Ronald is really getting into the nitty-gritty of understanding how to design online courses in a kind of open university context, and the public value that's created through that process, very much working with partners in the voluntary sector to do that. Daniel is looking at system leadership in mental health, voluntary public sector collaborations, again quite similar to some of the work that we've been doing in the mental health crisis project. And Akash is looking at creating collaborative advantage for public and social value. And again, all of the work that they're doing is very much kind of engaged social action research. It involves elements of ethnographic research and so on. So again, is very, very embedded socially valuable research. I wanted to just say a little bit about how we kind of feel that this research is translated into action, if you like. And largely we see that through the lens of our courses and our educational work. And again, Owen's talked about this already. At the very heart of that is the two leadership courses. So we've got Introduction to Leadership and Collaborative Leadership. These are courses that are available on OpenLearn, our platform. They are free, they're open access. You can engage with them in really interesting ways. You can do them whenever. There's no kind of time pressure on you to do those courses. And we think that's a really interesting way to begin to make an impact within the sector for people to take part in courses, utilising really up-to-date research, and to kind of make a difference to that key aspect of improving leadership across the sector. And sort of sitting alongside those, we've got a number of voluntary sector box, badged open courses, which provide more of a kind of introductory experience of the voluntary sector, and they've been really successful, again, over a longer period of time. And then we're sort of curating, if you like, a set of courses that exist from the university, and just given some brief examples. There are more. If you look on OpenLearn, there are many more of these courses that we think are relevant to the voluntary sector. Just a few there: campaigns and organisations, building relationships with donors, and digital literacy. But very much, the course is not the only sort of mechanism we have for reaching out to the sector. We have multiple channels. We've got the briefing papers, which a few of those are kicking around. They're all available on our website. In fact, everything here is hopefully available on our website. You can hold me to that. It should be up there. So we've got blogs. We've been holding webinars and seminars. We do a whole range of public events and even more informal discussions and kind of engagement activities with the sector. We do media, we do documentary, as you've seen, and of course we do the academic papers that we need to do, and obviously that makes a longer term impact. So do have a look at the briefing papers, because they kind of distill down some of our more recent thinking and literature reviewing that we've been doing, particularly around the question of collective leadership. And I think that's kind of where we think we're making quite a distinctive contribution around challenging some of these notions, as you've heard from Erin and others, about the kind of traditional heroic leadership model and kind of decentering leadership to a more collective framework. So, again, still thinking really about how we distill learning throughout our research and our engagement into a kind of coherent agenda. So I guess to step back a bit, I think for me, underpinning the Centre's agenda are these kind of driving questions that we have. And we ask firstly, what is distinctive about leadership in the voluntary sector? I think that's one of our guiding questions. You know, is there or is there not something distinctive about leadership in the voluntary sector? I think we begin to argue that there is. And what is the context for leadership in the voluntary sector, which is quite a different question and a different way of looking at that issue. So what is it that's distinctive about the voluntary sector that places particular demands and constraints on leaders within the sector? And finally, as a kind of broader question, what value can academic research add to contemporary leadership debates? And I guess if I can briefly sort of distill down some key messages from all of this work, I think for me, like the sector as a whole, and this again touches back on this question of understanding the sector more broadly, leadership challenges are extremely varied within the sector. So we have to be very aware of that complexity when we seek to understand leadership. So we're very interested in looking at leadership in different places and from different angles. And that includes the way in which we do research. So we're not just going to the traditional route of talking to a chief exec or talking to a chair of trustees, although we do that. We're talking to a range of different people. So we're talking to volunteers. By talking to, I mean interviewing or through different research methods. We're talking to service users. And we're really interested in kind of decentering these accounts of leadership that focus too much on kind of the heroic leaders I've mentioned. And I think more broadly, as we've heard already, the sector is facing some quite profound challenges, and this does mean that it's important to understand where leadership fits into that. I've talked about heroic leadership and collective forms of leadership, and I think the other thing that is very much in play is this aspect of collaboration and collaboration across boundaries, and that's very much sort of within the focus of what we do. So how do we do research? I think all of our research, despite the fact that it takes a much broader look at the voluntary sector, and that includes when the voluntary sector is delivering public services or engaging in sort of challenging power and using its voice in different ways, we're always coming back to this question of leadership and understanding leadership. And we view leadership through, in particular, I would say, through this collective lens. And I've talked about that already. And finally, to say that, again, that feeds in quite complex ways, actually, into our courses and leadership development. So we bring new perspectives and research findings directly into new and future courses. And we want to work very much with partners in the creation of new courses as well. So I'm going to say a little bit more about that. This is kind of my vision, I think, of how we want to work with partners and how we do work with partners. So it's kind of a bit of our offer to you as well. And part of the focus of this event is to have the chance to talk to you, to meet new people, and to further conversations that we've been having already. So I see our engagement as happening at different levels. Locally, within Milton Keynes, we engage with the local voluntary sector, and I have to apologise. I should have put some logos up here of Community Action MK, who we're working with, and the Community Foundation as well, but I just ran out of space, and I didn't want this to turn into kind of acronym soup. It's bad enough already. So I'll say a little bit more about the diagram in a minute. But we are working really well with the local voluntary sector, I hope, and Fidel is here. He's been helping to broker a lot of these relationships. What we've been developing is this idea of a local learning club to help support people through the leadership courses and to learn in a more kind of holistic and coherent way about how people experience those courses and what we can do to help support learners as they go through the courses. Because obviously what the online courses give us is this incredible reach, but we're actually increasingly finding that that people want support as well. So that's what we're trying to experiment with. And skipping up to the national level, we see this model as one that we can hopefully replicate at a larger level with other places. For example, it might be with other community foundations. And we want to work with key agencies, and particularly those that represent the voluntary sector in a broader sense. And we want to experiment with new forms of, or new partnerships to develop new courses. And again, we can think internationally as well. So some of the work we've been doing in Europe is about expanding that focus to a much larger level. So to try and explain this diagram, the way I see it is that actually we do a lot of engagement through our research. So we've got a number of research partners. Some of them, are in the room today. There are many more than just those 3 or 4. And so we engage with partners in all sorts of ways through the research that we do. But that feeds back into our courses. It feeds back into the conversations and the linkages that we have with other organisations who are maybe more interested in the kind of educational or leadership development side of things. So Cranfield Trust and NCVO and Volunteer Scotland, we've got relationships with all of these organisations and hope to do more. And what I kind of want to stress is that these build really interesting linkages across the kind of domains of research and online education. I'm not sure about this phrase, productive crossovers. I was trying to avoid saying synergies or something like that, and I'm really not sure this works. But for me, I just wanted to capture the way that it creates this really interesting sort of dynamic and environment where we've got all sorts of conversations happening across these different domains. And I think already we're beginning to see the kind of fruits of that through partnerships and collaboration. But I think we will really, certainly in the next year, we'll be able to really drive through some more really interesting developments around all of that. So finally, just to sum up, we're really excited to be recruiting, hopefully, a really good person in the next few weeks to play the part of a centre manager, sort of coordinating role within the centre, but also to do something more challenging, which is about being a kind of online learning fellow and developing and brokering a lot of these relationships with potential partners to improve and build on our online offer. So again, watch this space. We broadly speaking just hope to add to our capacity to develop and progress those partnerships, new courses. Obviously, as I've talked about, the research is slowly kind of edging towards completion, and we will do an increasing amount of kind of publication and dissemination of that work. PhD students are moving towards completion as well, hopefully, and we are sort of seeing new opportunities, particularly around issues around social enterprise, learning more from our online learning experience and moving into more kind of the kind of new digital technologies and linking the voluntary sector to that as well. So there's all sorts of new opportunities to do that, and we're looking at all sorts of proposals and opportunities I've mentioned. So my kind of plea to you really is join us if you can. Take part in what we're doing. We have a leaders panel in which people can get involved. We've got newsletters, social media that you can sign up to. Please do that, and I think you've been asked to sign up to the newsletter already. So yes, that's me. Thank you very much. I hope that gives you a kind of whistle-stop tour of all of the work that we're doing, and you can contact me on any of those channels. So thank you.